pretty much a minimalist when it comes to running in nullsec. This is a can you solo in nullsec? The answer is yes, but there's a lot of things to consider when you're looking to kind of break out on your own and still operate in null. I figure in this video I'm going to share kind of my experiences and kind of the, I guess, progression I went through from just being part of a normal corporation like most people are to kind of where I'm at now and kind of why I made the certain decisions along the way. One of the big things to consider when you're going null is it's going to be you're going to have cost associated. Everything, like if you're going to be renting in nullsec, right, the powers that be are going to have a cost assigned to you operating and existing in null. So you have to decide, what are you trying to get out of null? What are you trying to accomplish? How much can you play? How much do you normally play? And how much income you can actually generate and that you're willing to put towards just existing. Now, we'll start this off with kind of like story time, right? Whenever I first went to null after, high sec, I was part of, a alliance, a corporation, a mining corporation rather. So obviously at my corporation level, we were responsible for like buybacks and things like that to help support the alliance for the most part. But as a player, as a single solo player myself, I was not necessarily responsible for rent. I wasn't responsible for, I guess the administrative cost and fees and fines and all that stuff that goes into what you would normally have to worry about. So it was an opportunity for me to skill up. It was an opportunity for me to learn game mechanics. It was an opportunity for me to just kind of figure out how everything works in that kind of ecosystem that is null. Now, after I left that corporation, left that alliance, that's when I started my own corporation, where I had, basically myself with cyno and everything like that. And I did at one point rent a system in nullsec, but I quickly decided that I didn't want to dump a ton of money every month into just existing in null, especially when my playtime was extremely limited, because there's a lot of things that you have to consider when you're going out solo. So the first category we're going to talk about is just solo renting, right? Because chances are you're not going to get a null as a solo corporation and find a system that you don't have to pay somebody else for, right? And now let's talk about responsibilities. A player-owned starbase, a pause plus fuel, right? These are highly recommended, especially if you're going to be doing everything to meet the alliance's requirements for renting. And having that pause running means that you're going to be using fuel per hour. If you have your own structures, which you probably will, because you're going to want to dock, especially if you want to grow and do certain things like manufacturing, those structures are going to require fuel. So at the very top, after you pay rent, after you do all these things, you're still going to have fuel requirements. And yes, you can buy these fuel blocks from somebody else. You can import them, and that costs obviously for getting them jumped out or whatever. But in most cases, for what I was doing, I was just making the fuel blocks because I had the skills to do so. The other things you have to realize is ADMs, your indexes. Now, alliances are going to have requirements for you to keep these at. This is your military, and this is your industry. These are indexes that are required a certain level, whether it be wartime or maritime or whatever. And the ADMs are easy enough as a solo player. Like if you go out and do like ice or moon, your industry is, and if you're doing ice to like make fuel blocks, you kind of like two birds, one stone, right? Because you'll mine ice to make fuel blocks, and the industry index is based off M3 over a certain amount of time. So ice is the best way to actually increase your industry index. But then also you're gonna have to worry about ratting, because that's one of the more important ones, is like your military index, and the alliance is going to want to keep all their military indexes as high as possible, especially during wartime. And if right now, if you're in an alliance, chances are they're probably involved in some sort of war. And then obviously your iHub upgrades. If you want anything, if you want to customize your system that you're renting, if you want more ratting sites, or if you want the ore anomalies, which requires the ore prospecting arrays, or the prospecting arrays, you're going to be in charge of paying for those, and you can't get those back, right? That's kind of like rigging a Tatara, or putting rigs on things like that. Like when you pay for an iHub upgrade, you're not going to get that money back, and in most cases, your rent is going to go up because of the iHub upgrades that have already been installed. So keep that in mind. Let's let's talk about cost, and this is going to differ for a lot of alliances, but for the most part, the system you're looking at is going to have a base cost, and then they're going to add premium value onto that system for if it's a dead end or if it has ice, and then that price is going to fluctuate up or down depending on the number of planets or the number of moons. And then, if you're a solo player and you're not able to keep your ADMs up, the alliance may come in and actually boost your ADMs to their standard. And if they do that, chances are they're going to have you pay a fine for them having to manage that for you. And then also, depending on what iHub upgrades are already present in that system, they're going to increase the price on that as well as just added value. Now, you don't just system availability is going to be your biggest issue, because a lot of dead end systems that have ice, like this would be like the ideal system, right? Having a dead end system with ice with a good amount of with the planets, like you want minimum at least a lava, and then gas, and then barren, right? I would say, because if you're going to make your own fuel blocks to help sustain your structures and your POS and everything, you're going to want to set up PI, and these are going to be the bare minimum requirements to set up for your PI to make your fuel blocks, and then you have to do ice. I prefer making ice blocks for my structures and stuff like that because it helps with the industry index, but you can also import it, right? So this was the route I actually went when I first went solo, right? And it requires a lot of networking. And it requires a lot of because like most of the time alliances are going to have a minimum member count for a corporation. Because what you have to keep in mind is if somebody does recon on your system, because when you put a structure out, anybody can come in that structure, look at whose corp it is, and they can start doing research on your corp. If they find out that you're a solo player with a structure, then you're going to be on the top of the target list. So you're going to get your timer, ticked almost constantly, because they know that the response fleet would have to be the alliance and not necessarily come from the corporation. So you got to realize you're extremely vulnerable as a structure owning solo corp, right? Now, this is not impossible, right? You can do this, and like I would say, like with all of this, if you even had the best system in the world and everything was set up, you're probably going to pay, depending on what your system rent is, and I've seen them go anywhere from 2 billion to upwards to 8 billion a month for a system, and it all depends on everything that goes into that system and how much it's valued. You're probably, if you get a really good system, you're probably going to pay, I would say, 8 to 10 plus a month, which means that you're automatically going to be required to play a certain amount in order to if you want to have structures, if you want to actually set up proper, if you want to have structures, you're going to have to play a lot in order to make your fuel blocks to fuel your structures and your POS, keep your ADMs up, and get all the iHub upgrades you want, and after all your cost, have enough ISK left over to actually grow your character and grow your kind of your operation. Now let's talk about like skills that would be required for you to do this successfully. You need decent ratting skills because you want to be able to pump that military index. You want to be able to rat enough to keep that index up yourself. Then also you need some like ice and moon mining skills. This is to make fuel blocks and also to pump the industry index. Most of the time, alliances will rent out the moons separate from the system. So even though you're renting a system, doesn't mean you actually have access to the moons. They're going to rent all those moons out on a different. That's not even included. Like you get access to everything in your system, probably except for moons. That's generally how I've seen it done, which isn't a bad thing, because if you're renting a system and you're worried about keeping your ADMs up, your industry index up, then if the alliance is renting moons in your system to other corporations, that's actually good for you, because when those people come in and mine those moon pops, they're actually helping your index. So then all you have to really worry about is kind of like everything else, right? So don't get too bent out of shape on that. And that's really one of the benefits of moon mining. If you're not actually doing inventions, or if you're not actually using the moon goop for stuff, it's really kind of just a tool to help you keep that index up. And then you have PI, right? And that's why I went back to saying you need like lava, gas, barren planets, because you want to be able to set up PI so that you can make the PI for the fuel blocks and then mine the ice. And so you can kind of keep your costs down for importing. And obviously you need some manufacturing skills in order to make the fuel blocks as well, which isn't, too crazy. I mean, you definitely probably do want an engineering complex if you're going to be making fuel blocks. So you keep that in mind. In most cases, for successful, like legit operations in null, even at a solo level, you're still going to be looking at having a citadel and some sort of refinery and then some sort of engineering complex. So you've got to worry about 3 structures and then a POS, right? The other thing to realize too is several months ago, earlier this year, medium structures got a huge nerf. So most alliances are not really willing for you to drop medium structures, with the exception of Athenors for moon mining specifically. So when it comes down to like citadels, they won't necessarily let you drop an Ostra house, but they're going to be more inclined to. They're going to want you to drop like a Fortizar or a Tatara, or probably a Raitaru or something like that. Like it's very. They're not going to feel very comfortable with you dropping medium structures. With that being said, you have a lot more fuel requirement when you're looking at those larger structures. Now, I did this for a while. It's very possible. It's extremely possible. If you have the skill set for your characters and you're able to do all this, you can make a killing. One thing you have to worry about is you're going to have blues, which is like alliance members or something like that. They're going to come in, they're going to run your rat sites, they're going to run your data sites, and it's going to be a full-time job keeping people off your stuff, which there's alliance-based rules on all this, but it's really kind of a losing battle, and you can't let that really upset you, and it gets really annoying. But also you have to worry about just like regular newts coming through and kind of interrupting the whole like operations to keep everything running. For me, I just didn't play enough at the time to really. And you're going to sub rent. You're going to be in agreement with that corporation. He's like, okay, mining or whatever the case may be, you know, is possible. But for the most part, when you sub rent, you're basically just. This is really just about tracking ISK earning as a solo player in null. You understand that I like to do everything kind of with as minimal characters as possible. So in terms of just assets, I usually run this Tengu for ratting. It can be even just like hubs. Just doing like a massive amount of hubs can do quite a bit. And I like doing ratting like that because that ISK is just straight to wallet. And we'll be tracking my wallet as we kind of go through this series and everything. And then I'm also running a, let's go and simulate this procure. This procure right now is set up with deep core mining with Mercox's crystals, and really a lot of the mining I'm doing in nullsec is usually very focused. So Mercox is a really good thing to go after because it's high value. When I do industry and things like that, then I'll go after things that I need to complete certain tasks. But for the most part, if I'm just kind of hunting ISK, and that's what I'm really doing in this series, is just maximizing the amount of income we can make per month. Having a procure is cheap. This whole fit right here is 171 million. I take this thing out a couple times to do Mercoxis, and it pays for itself. And then also, I usually run a buzzard for data relic sites. The reason I do this is because relic sites are really, that's what I'm really doing. Mercox, Nelson Eve, you can, scale to a crazy amount when you add more and more characters to everything. But for me, and if you're a viewer of this channel, then you understand that I like to do everything kind of with as minimal characters as possible. So in terms of just assets, I usually run this Tengu for ratting. It can be even just like hubs. Just doing like a massive amount of hubs can do quite a bit. And I like doing ratting like that because that ISK is just straight to wallet. And we'll be tracking my wallet as we kind of go through this series and everything. And then I'm also running a, let's go and simulate this procure. This procure right now is set up with deep core mining with Mercox's crystals, and really a lot of the mining I'm doing in nullsec is usually very focused. So Mercox is a really good thing to go after because it's high value. When I do industry and things like that, then I'll go after things that I need to complete certain tasks. But for the most part, if I'm just kind of hunting ISK, and that's what I'm really doing in this series, is just maximizing the amount of income we can make per month. Having a procure is cheap. This whole fit right here is 171 million. I take this thing out a couple times to do Mercoxis, and it pays for itself. And then also, I usually run a buzzard for data relic sites. The reason I do this is because relic sites are really, really, really good money for the time invested. You can make, even as an alpha running like a Heron or something in nullsec, doing relic sites, you can do like 90 million a day easily. And with like a buzzard or like a more omega kind of focused scanning exploration ship, you can do even better. I usually go and I scan data and relics, and I'll run all those. If it's low end DED sites, then I'll run those with the Tengu usually. But I try to keep things pretty simple in terms of ratting and exploration. But this is also exploration, and with this buzzard, just adds a whole lot more to the kind of daily or monthly ISK that kind of gets stockpiled up. And then I have the crane is essentially my go-to travel ship and what I kind of use for PI. PI is really important for this setup. I am currently going to be producing basically mechanical parts. Mechanical parts are in high demand in nullsec. That way, because of fuel blocks and things like that. Now I can pretty much make any PI I want. I can even go on a single character up to like robotics, which also work towards fuel blocks, but I choose not to, just because of more levels you're gonna have to stack on everything. I usually just stop at mechanical parts. They're not the highest value for PI, but your output per month is really nice, and the point is to actually sell them locally, or the items or the freight load that you're taking, and I always have to take 80 million off of that. But by doing by actually just doing mechanical parts, I know that I can sell it locally. I don't even have to travel out of system. I can just kind of get rid of that stuff for people who are making fuel blocks. So that is the main focus for PI. As far as items go, as you can see, I've did some a lot of experimenting with PI. I've got some viral agents, biomass. Biomass is one of the highest P1 as far as ISK per M3. Viral agent is is the highest P2 for ISK per M3, and then also I have my stockpile of mechanical parts that we're kind of running. Spare drones. These spare drones are really for the procurer, and then I have extra missiles and stuff for the Tengu. And then these medium core defense ones and these medium Mercoxis rigs are spares, because if I want to go to like another system and do some mining there and I don't really want to like gate the procurer, this allows me to actually repackage everything into the crane, and then when I get to where I'm going, I have the rigs to kind of throw on. In most cases, I run rigless because these don't really add a whole lot, but I brought them out here, just to have some in case I want to kind of move around a little bit, and then just some bacteria. I usually come out initially with a lot of command centers, even though I have all my PI already set up, so I don't really have to worry too much about all this. All right, I'm going to talk a little bit about the kind of the day to day, and like this series is going to be like kind of a day in the life of a nullsec living. I know a lot of people are interested in kind of what the day to day lifestyle of nullsec, solo, especially a solo player, is. But essentially, I'm going to kind of walk through like the activities that I primarily focus on uh, to kind of help get to a certain point. Now, in terms of like ISK goals uh, per month, I've done with my main back in like December or so. I did roughly, I want to say like anywhere, which just really depended, but 8 to like 14 bill a month, and that was doing like really high end DED sites and stuff like that. But I think the goal for this character really is to just try to do 10 bill as a single character, and we're gonna get there mainly by ratting, and ratting being like probably hubs, a lot of hubs, and probably rally points, and we can do these as much as we want, right? We have an upgrade system, so there's really no limit on what we can kind of do here. I think I would say over the course of the entire month, I would expect this to contribute somewhere in the neighborhood of like 2 bill or so towards that 10. And then we have PI. PI right now is going to be essentially our passive income, and we're going to be contract selling this stuff. So we're making mech parts. And the reason we're making mech parts is because they're really high demand because of fuel blocks and stuff like that. And we can essentially contract sell them locally, so we don't have to worry about export cost or anything like that. And right now, with my PI setup, I have a spreadsheet where I calculate all this stuff. I can turn out probably 1.2, probably about 1.2 billion with that as well. If we decide we want to kind of like plus up the PI side of things, then we can adjust. But I feel pretty good about, and even if we don't, like, that's the thing about mechanical parts, is even if we don't end up selling them, and we do have to, like, kind of look towards maybe more export, we could technically kind of expand it a little bit. We could actually modify our character, our 6 planets, into going straight to like robotics. And if that is the case, then we would already have a good stockpile of the mechanical parts that would go into that. And then we have basically data. I'd say data relic sites are are a pretty good source of income as well. These can technically be like you could, if you really kind of go out there and find them, you can get like upwards to like over 100 million a day and everything. But we probably won't be hitting them that hard. It just kind of really depends on availability. I don't necessarily like to have like really strict rules for data relic, because some days you can just have no good data relic sites, or you can have them and they're cherry picked and things like that. But I would say that you could pretty much do like 500 million a week. So I would say that this would probably contribute roughly 2 bill towards the kind of overall monthly thing. And so right now, between ratting, PI, data relic sites, we're already at a little over 5. And then you have mining. Mining being our main focus would be Merc. And we can do, if we're really diligent about the Merc mining, we can do it like pretty much every week, and probably turn about like probably about 300 or more. Well, actually, probably more like 500 a week for the most part. Yeah, it just kind of depends on if anybody else is mining it and how often we're actually going out there and doing it. So I'd say, we'll lowball it. We'll say 1.5 bill on that a month. So we're slowly getting there. And then you could do. I'm not really planning on doing industry here. I'm researching BPOs, but a lot of the value in industry out here is doing crazy amounts of volume. And if you want to make any sort of money with manufacturing, then every other activity you do in the game needs to kind of support that. And we're not trying to exclusively go down that kind of manufacturing chain, especially if like the market or the ability to sell it locally is kind of hit or miss. So as you can see here, if we have a 10 bill goal and we're just doing like these 4 main kind of activities, the really nice thing about ratting is this can be scaled pretty high. You can even go up to 5 bill here. So this is kind of like our ringer. We can essentially, if we are getting further in the month and we're a little shy on where we want to be, we can just go out and do more ratting essentially, or we can go out and hit data relic sites a little bit more. But 10 bill, if we can manage to do 10 bill in the first month with this character, that'll be really good. I would say, even if you're out here doing this as well, 5 to 10 bill is probably, you know, if you're in that range, you're doing pretty well. Especially considering the fact that, like, if, let's say you're trying to use that ISK, you're trying to change over to Plex and like Plex yourself as well, then once you actually get past like that, whatever it is, like 2.4, 2.5 billion for your Omega every month, then you have everything above that is basically income. So that's kind of, I wanted to just kind of walk through the kind of basics of like what I got in my head right now. This like I said, this series is going to be tracking wallet. So we have another planet we're about to set up, and we were at like 7 million, but like 7 million was basically from Project Discovery. I guess that's another thing I should talk about is Project Discovery. It's a pretty good amount of ISK as well, because of all the stuff you kind of get out of it. But that's kind of a passive thing that I really don't do. I'm not really diligent about it anymore. But as far as like starting as a starting point for this episode, we right now are at 650,000. And what we'll do is every episode and everything will kind of be tracking that, tracking ratting ticks and stuff. But right now I'm gonna set up to kind of cap this first episode off. I all my PI is set up right now on 5 planets. So what I'm doing is I'm doing 2 planets of precious metals. I'm doing 2 planets of reactive metals, and then I have a process planet for mechanical parts, which has 24 factories. But I have a additional planet slot that I am going to kind of run a little experiment on because I like doing experiments. They're all nice and fun, and I'll kind of show I'll walk you through the kind of setup there and what I'm thinking and all that to kind of round this video out. All right.
Connecting.